Hello, welcome to Do It Yourself with Wayne. Today we're going to be changing the filter in our in-house water filter. This is pretty standard that would be in a lot of houses. Sometimes you'll have two of these canisters like this. In our case we only have the one, but it's sufficient for our house. Before you start changing this, you should have two water cutoff valves, one before and one after your filter. You want to cut both of these off. You may have different styles of valves. You may have the kind that you turn. You may have these are just quarter turn. I like the quarter turn ones, but either style works just fine. After you turn your water off, you should have a little button. Ours is red here on the top, and if you press that button, you get that little squirt of water. Now what that does is it reduces the pressure of the water that's inside your filter cartridge. Now the filter cartridge, you should have something like this that'll fit on the cartridge that you use to just unscrew the cartridge. And I should have mentioned this sooner, but make sure you got a bucket underneath your filter cartridge, because you are going to be dealing with water dripping. Make sure you got a water filter or a bucket. This is our old filter. As you can see, it's pretty dirty from catching the sediments and stuff that comes out of our well. We do have a well. It's not a municipal system. And you always want to clean out the container that holds your cartridge. Now in our case, the thing that we're catching the most is grit. That's a real fine sandy grit. That's the biggest problem that we have with our particular well. But different people will have different things. But you want to make sure that you get that stuff cleaned out. Depending on how bad it is, you may even want to take this to a sink and rinse it out. One thing you want to be sure of is there's a rubber seal inside here. Make sure you get that rubber seal good and clean. In our case, particularly with the grit, if we don't get all the grit off of that rubber seal, sometimes we'll get an occasional drips where this thing doesn't seal well. And of course we keep our bucket underneath it just in case that happens. And the bucket catches the drips, but you don't want that dripping. So you may want to take this to a sink or something, or out in the yard with a hose pipe, and make sure you clean it out good before you start putting it back. Now normally up in the top here where your seal's against doesn't get that dirty, because when it's generally like this, and the dirt doesn't collect at the top, or the grit in our case. So when you take the cartridge off, that generally stays fairly clean up in there. But wipe it off with a rag or something just to make sure there's no crud up in there. Now we're going to take this to a sink. We're going to rinse it out. We'll be right back. Okay, at this point, we've cleaned our cartridge out, and my sweetie that is camera shy won't stick her head in here and introduce herself, but she reminded me of the big old duh-huh. Our water's cut off. Makes it kind of hard to go to a sink and rinse this out. But one thing we do have that we use sometimes is right over here we have a little faucet that's part of the well. The faucet is still on the pressure side of our water. So I just moved the bucket over so it's under our faucet. I use the water from there to rinse this out. And also, if you're real careful, in our case, inside here, the seal is an O-ring. To clean this a little bit better than maybe I normally do, I pull the O-ring out. Just be careful you don't put a nick in it or anything. If you nick the O-ring, you got to replace it, okay? Because it'll leak if it's got a nick in it. But I pulled the O-ring out, cleaned the groove real good, wiped the O-ring down real good. I took my paper, this paper towel. I wiped up here real good, just clean all that real good, get all the crud off of it so that we'll get a better seal and this thing don't drip once in a while. Okay, in our case, our new clean filters come in a package something like this. Normally we buy these as a 2-pack. Obviously we've already used one out. But this is what our clean new filter looks like. And basically after you got all this cleaned up, you just put it down in there. There's a little tab in the bottom that it sets on. And then you put it up in there. Sometimes you got to be careful that it sits up in the top right. you screw it up there. If this feels like it's not going up far enough, what can happen is when your filter sits in the cartridge holder, there's a little thing in the bottom that helps keep it centered. There's a little thing up in the top that helps keep the cartridge, that white part, centered. If it gets on the edge, your cartridge cover here won't screw all the way up. So you got to make sure that you got your cartridge on the inside, the white fibery looking part, centered up good, so that this part will screw up all the way and seal itself. And you want to pull it all the way up. You're going to take your handle back on here and snug it up a little bit. And generally we just leave the handle on there. You don't have to. It's just personal preference. It doesn't matter. Then you cut your water back on. I don't know if you can see it, but this canister just filled up with water, but there is some air pressure in there, some air. You'll get that air coming out through some of your faucets and stuff in the house. When I cut this on, that puts the water pressure to the rest of the house. But just remember, when you go to your bathroom sink or your kitchen sink or whatever, flush your toilet, for a little while you're going to get some air in your lines. So just be aware that that's going to happen, but you're going to get that. Now after you do that, check this for leaks. If you have a slow leak, you may not see it right away, so that's why you want to keep your bucket underneath it. So basically, that's it for replacing the filter cartridge on one of these home water filter systems. They work really well. They filter a lot of stuff out of your water. If you have any kind of concerns with your water, I would recommend you get a filter of some sort. Like I said earlier, this is pretty typical of what you see in a house, and they work really well for most things. And you know, if you have any questions or comments, please comment at the bottom of the page. And we'd like to thank you for visiting Do It Yourself with Wayne. We'd really appreciate it if you would like our videos and subscribe to our channel. It helps us grow and provide more do-it-yourself videos for saving you money, and that's what Do It Yourself with Wayne is all about, is saving you money. Thank you for visiting us.